Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Municipal Safety Committee. On the committee tonight joining us is Council Charest, Council Manning Martin, Council Turco, and Council Welton on the subcommittee. And also joining us is Council O'Neill, Council Welton, Council McGinn, and Council Rossignol. We have two items on the agenda tonight. The first is a motion from Council Gould, move to request an update on the Gardiner Park signage area. And at this point, I'm going to turn over to Council Gould for an update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, Mr. Chairman, we've been at this for almost 2 years, and we were able to get funding from DOT after very involved and lengthy study of what was needed to improve not just the truck traffic, but the speeding and other signage. It's kind of an interesting intersection of many roads, Route 35 from Danvers, Route 114 here in Peabody, Pulaski Street, Gardiner Street, a lot of different things going on. So we were able to get funding through Mass DOT to create some new trucking and speeding signs, and thankful to the mayor for funding it for us. And we're in the process of creating the signs, and then I'll report back when the signs are about to be mounted. And so that's a report of progress, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Gould. Appreciate that, and we'll look forward to future updates. Next item on the agenda is a motion regarding discussions of costs associated with safety measures at the intersection of Bartholomew Street. Oh, excuse me.
Something's up with the audio here. Okay.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to take about a quick 30-second, 1-minute recess. I think we're all having a hard time hearing, as I was. So, 60-second recess. Excuse me.
John, by the way, there's a switch behind the door to shut the fan off.
Thank you for that technical difficulty. We'll continue now with the Municipal Safety Committee meeting. And item number 2 on the agenda this evening is discussion regarding questions of costs associated with safety measures at the intersection of Bartholomew Street and Linfield Street and any other intersections referred to in the traffic study. And I'm going to turn it over to Councilor Welton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, fellow councilors, for joining today. Just as a quick background and reminder, we began this discussion about 2 or 3 months ago following an accident at the interchange of Linfield and Bartholomew Street, which prompted the decision to take a closer look into the traffic study that was completed by World Tech. Subsequently, I've had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Benevento from World Tech, and there are a few different options that are before us tonight. This meeting is for information so that we have a better idea of the type of potential traffic recommendations that are out there to help make that interchange a more safe travel for all of our constituents in South Peabody. So I'd like to turn it over to Rich and have him go over the presentation from World Tech, if you wouldn't mind.
Council, can I just have a motion to receive the documents, please?
Thank you. I apologize. Motion to receive the documents, which consist of each different traffic option that are outlined. One you'll see is a roundabout, and the second is a signalized intersection. So what we are receiving are 4 separate documents, 2 diagrams, and the associated estimated construction cost breakout. So moved.
Heard the motion. We'll take a roll call vote. We do have Zoom participation this evening. Thank you.
Councilors Manning. She is no longer with us. Nope.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
Charis.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Sasslaw.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Mr. Benevento, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for having me in, Mr. Chairman, members of the Council Subcommittee. I keep moving this thing, and I don't want to. Let's go. Let me back right up. All right. So I wanted to present a little bit of information on the Linfield Street at Bartholomew Street intersection. We did meet with the mayor and the council, a couple of the councilors, to talk about this. So tonight, I'd like to just give you a little background as to some of the information that we found during the traffic study, and then also some of the options that we came up with. Again, this is at the conceptual design phase, so we don't have the benefit of topographic survey and things like that. So, but it does give us a good barometer as to what we have out there and what we could actually do. So, just a little background information based on the study information that we collected. Linfield Street, east of Casco, the average daily traffic is about 18,200 vehicles per day, which is a sizable amount of traffic. Incidentally, we collected traffic in November and December of 2019, so these are pre-COVID numbers. So you can see that's a pretty high volume on Linfield Street. The posted speed is 40 miles per hour, which is pretty good clip for a roadway of that function. The 85th percentile speed, which is what we look at in eastbound direction, is 38, westbound direction is 36. So they're pretty, folks are driving pretty much the prevailing speed and the posted speed of the roadway. In terms of crashes, 5.3 crashes per year. That's approximately what MassDOT has both at state and district-wide level. So we're right about the district average for and the statewide average for crashes for that roadway based on MassDOT data. When we did the analysis, one of the things we look at in terms of whether an intersection requires improvement is we look at traffic signal warrants. This particular intersection Usually you want one. This particular intersection actually passed 3 separate warrants. Warrant 1, which is 8-hour, that means that the volume of traffic during an 8-hour period exceeds certain thresholds that would require that you need a traffic signal. It also exceeded the 4-hour warrant, and it also exceeded the warrant 3, which is the peak hour warrant. So the big one here is warrant 1, and generally if we're doing work for Mass DOT and we're looking at whether an intersection requires a signal, they're generally focused on the 8-hour warrant. And so in this case, you can see that this particular location would warrant traffic signals, just based on volume. One of the things, too, that we talked about when we met with the mayor is we look at 2 things. One, first of all, is safety. Safety is always paramount. Sometimes we try to achieve a better level of service. Level of service is A through F, where A is free-flow traffic and F is you're sitting in a traffic jam. You're waiting to go. Sometimes in a dense urban setting, we're happy to get a better F, right? In this case, capacity is certainly an issue at this location. One of the problems with capacity relative to safety is driver frustration. So at this particular location, someone may be trying to get out of Bartholomew Street. There's a lot of traffic on Linfield Street. They may try to get out when it's really not safe to do so, but they're frustrated, so they're going to go for it. They're going to try and get out. So that's why we sort of blend together capacity and safety. Again, we always err on safety first. We'll actually sacrifice, in the traffic engineering world, we'll sacrifice convenience sometimes for safety. In this case, and you're going to see with a little bit more information I'm going to provide here, is that capacity is really the issue here. And certainly that, as I said, directly reflects safety as well. So these are the turning movements that were collected. I apologize, I was trying to throw this together quickly this morning, and Bartholomew Street is written upside down, but you know what I'm talking about. You can see that the turning movements here are pretty heavy. So you can see on Linfield Street westbound, the evening straight through is 394 throughs. Excuse me, the morning. The evening is 905 throughs. But you can see the left turns in the evening. Actually, that might be the morning one. I'm sorry. It's 257 left turns. That's a tremendously high amount of left turns. When we did the capacity analysis, the intersection operates at a level of service F, particularly because of these left turns. You can also see the turns coming out of Bartholomew Street in the evening, that 250 turns trying to come out onto Linfield Street from Bartholomew. And again, you can see the volumes heading westbound on Linfield Street, 569, 660. These are pretty heavy volumes during the peak hours. Peak hours, by the way, 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. In the afternoon. So again, it's the commuter traffic, people coming in and out. That's generally what we look at. I would suspect that there's probably high volumes on the weekends, on Saturday, maybe the Saturday midday. Those are the kind of volumes that you're going to see. So we looked at 2 alternatives. Certainly the first one we looked at was a traffic signal. And you can see from the graphic that when we analyze the traffic signal, just putting a signal there, keeping the lane assignments the way they are, we still got a level of service F. And the only way we can really achieve a better level of service is that left turn pocket. You see the left turn pocket heading westbound on Linfield Street. So it's important to have that left turn pocket to get vehicles out of the travel way that are waiting to make the left turn onto Bartholomew Street. Again, safety improvements, pedestrian safety, there's really no crosswalks out there. The sidewalks are sporadic. So obviously, with any intersection project, we're looking at not only vehicular safety, but we're looking at pedestrian safety. We know that the city has an adopted complete streets policy. You know, can we dial in bike lanes and things like that? You know, so all of these things have to be considered for a project like this. So again, pretty simple: traffic signal, left turn pocket, Smart traffic signal control. It's traffic responsive, so we're detecting traffic. If there's no traffic on Bartholomew Street, for example, the lights on Linfield Street would rest on green till someone approaches. The lights change. The timing is such that based on what the volume of traffic is. So if the volume in the morning, there are a lot of left turners heading onto Bartholomew Street going to work, that the signal timing adjusts for that. So it's a traffic responsive system, and it adjusts to the traffic volume both in the AM and the PM hours, as well as the off time. The other option we looked at was a roundabout. And interestingly enough, when we're doing projects for Mass DOT and we're proposing a traffic signal, they require us now to also look at a roundabout option. Roundabout actually worked very well in terms of level of service. Now, what we're showing here, and again, this is without the benefit of survey and that sort of thing, and it's my understanding in the southwest corner of this intersection, that's city-owned land. If we had the roundabout where it's shown on that graphic there, we'd probably need land takings. But in this case, we would probably shift the roundabout so that we minimize the amount of right-of-way that we need. But from a functional standpoint, the roundabout works very well. The other good thing about the roundabout is that it slows traffic down. Generally, roundabouts, the prevailing speed through a roundabout is 20 to 25 miles per hour. We know that the traffic on Linfield Street, you saw, people are traveling 38 miles an hour. That's the 85th percentile speed. I'm sure there are other people that are not traveling at 40 miles per hour, the posted speed. The roundabout forces people to slow down. There are a lot of roundabouts in the area. We've designed several of them. One most notable one is if you get off exit 18 in Beverly to Route 22, if you're going to Harry Ball Field, right at the end of that ramp, there's a new roundabout there. We designed that for the city. Mayor Cahill is a huge roundabout fan. Every time we have an intersection project, he says, gee, can we get a roundabout in there? So, but that works very well. It slowed traffic down. The other thing about a roundabout is long-term cost, right? There's no power cost because there's no traffic signals there. And it also keeps traffic moving, as opposed to with a signal, everybody has to wait their turn. With a roundabout, it's more of a yield type of operation where people have to yield to the people in the roundabout. The other thing, too, that you'll see here is that we would have flashing beacons and so forth to allow for pedestrians to cross. There's splitter islands that go into the roundabout. Through those splitter islands are where the pedestrians cross. And so it also provides good pedestrian accommodation as well. With that, okay, so what are some of the costs of these things? Interestingly enough, they're pretty close in terms of cost. I gave you a preliminary estimate in your handout, mostly major items. Again, we don't have benefit of survey here. We haven't even got to a preliminary design phase, but just based on our experience and what some of the major items might be, you're looking at, for a signalized intersection, $1.24 million for construction. Generally, engineering is about 10% of that cost. Contract administration, having an inspector reviewing project submittals and that sort of thing, is about another $100,000 for the course of the project. And so the estimated project cost is, somewhere in the order of $1.5 million. The roundabout, similarly, $1.13 million for the roundabout. Again, one might say, well, geez, you're just kind of dropping the circle in, or you're just putting a traffic signal in. There's other work that goes with that. Obviously, the approaches to the intersection, you can't just do 100 feet within the intersection. You have to make sure that there's proper approaches to the intersection and the effective treatments that go with those. Again, with the roundabout engineering, about $115,000. Contract administration, again, $100,000. So about $1.3 million for the roundabout option. So relative to the two options, they're about the same cost. Next steps, if the council decides that this is something to move forward, if it's in the budget, there's certain things obviously that need to be done. First and foremost, as you heard me mention, getting the survey, getting to a preliminary design phase, which is about a 50% design phase. Obviously, the public participation process with any project like this, having public information meetings, getting public input. We do a lot of public meetings. Matter of fact, the public hearing for the Central Street project will be coming up on June 23rd. Mass DOT will be hosting that, or conducting it. The city will be hosting, but we often get comments at public hearings, well, we want you to fix it, but don't change anything, you know, so that's why it's important to have a public process and have the public involved. And then once we're through that, we get to final design. You know, the design of a project like this, because it's not Mass DOT review and going through, you know, all this submission process, the design like this, let's say, for example, we said, okay, let's get going on this. We start in July. The design could be done probably by the end of the year. You could bid it during the winter season. It could be under construction potentially next spring. Construction phase of a project like this, probably 12 to 18 months in either case. What takes a while with the roundabout, obviously, is more excavation, more traffic management. With traffic signals, they never have traffic signal mast arms and things like that on the shelf. Usually that equipment takes at least 6 months to order, so things like that. So it's 12 to 18-month process just in terms of moving forward. So again, short and sweet kind of presentation. As I said, we're in a conceptual design phase at this point. There's a lot of work yet to be done if the city were to move forward with this. But at this point, I'm ready to take your questions, and we'll try to answer them as best I can.
Thank you. Council Welton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Sasslaw. I've had the benefit of having this document longer than some of the other councilors, so I certainly have a couple questions, but I'd love to open it up to my fellow councilors if anyone does have any questions at this moment.
Council Rossignol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on this subcommittee, but I appreciate you letting me speak. You know, through your presentation, you mentioned that this is a lengthy process, funding. In the now, one of the things that, and I know this area pretty well, I grew up on Bartholomew Street, is there any way that we could, I think one of the problems in this area is, and you mentioned it, is driver frustration. Somebody's taking a left from Linfield to try to get on Bartholomew Street. They can't actually make it, so the guy goes around. As somebody's coming out of Bartholomew Street, bang, there's your accident. Is there any way with painting that we can kind of corral traffic from deterring them from getting frustrated and kind of bypassing the rules of the road, if you will? Because two things. A, I love the roundabout idea. It's expensive, it's lengthy, it's time. But for the now, and trying to accommodate this area and try to get something done in the immediate future, I think that will at least alleviate some frustration that's happening today.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, even if, let's say we put the left turn pocket in, right, on Linfield Street, just to kind of get people out of the way, what we're trying to do is simplify the driving function, right? And you're going to get the timid folks that don't want to move out, that they're going to wait. People behind them are frustrated. Or you're going to get the aggressive driver. I'm kind of like that. I'm a barge and block guy, right? Barge and block, kind of barge your way out, block everybody, then you pull out, right? In this particular case, particularly because of the volumes, and the Warren analysis tells us that, right? Because there's a problem for 8 hours, 4 hours, and during the peak hour, right? Because of the traffic volumes, it's hard to do that with just, say, putting some paint down and that sort of thing. We really have to control the intersection, and that's what the issue is. It's controlling it, and you know, maybe trying to tighten the intersection up or things like that. It's not going to be what you want in terms of what you just mentioned. You know, how do we sort of control folks from making dangerous moves, right? It's a tough thing to do. I mean, we could try and tighten the intersection up, but again, it's not going to get us to where we need to be to really solve the problem. You know, I don't know if I'm trying not to evade your question, but it's like, again, the volumes on at this intersection are so very high that it would be tough to do that.
I appreciate your honesty. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Council Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. So a resident actually suggested this rotary idea a couple of years ago, and to be honest with you, I thought it was ridiculous when I first heard it, but to look at it now, I actually like the option of the rotary. I like it better than a traffic signal. I think it will naturally slow the speed on the street while allowing traffic to still flow properly. So I'm a fan of the rotary now, looking at it and reading about it. But my question to you is, well, with regard to the entire traffic study. So I'm sure you had a chance, or you actually conducted the original traffic study. So for the entire street, so is there an orderly fashion to how we should go about completing? There's additional items on that study that need to get done at some point. So does this, if we put this in the lead, does that interfere with anything else you may do in the upcoming years to address some of those other issues in the traffic study?
No, I mean, in terms of intersections, the intersections are far enough apart. So one of the other intersections we looked at was County at Summit, right? Well, that's way down the road. And then we had another comment like, okay, well, if we do something at Bartholomew Street, are we going to have traffic backing up to Casco Road, right? Because there was that other issue, right, down at Casco. Again, with a roundabout, everything keeps moving, right? With traffic signals, there's all sorts of things you can do, queue detectors and things like that. To your answer, no. I mean, I think that whatever else happens on the Linfield Street corridor, improvements here aren't going to necessarily, we're not going to have to undo things. I guess that's the biggest thing. We don't want to spend money and then 5 years later we're undoing stuff. One of the things that just west of the intersection, the road's really wide, right? It's like there's a lot of pavement. That's another thing that we don't want to give drivers too much pavement, because what happens when they have more pavement? They're doing other things, right? So let's say at some point the city decided that they're going to do other improvements on Linfield Street. We're going to do a road diet. We're going to, squeeze the lanes. We're going to move the curbs in. It doesn't affect this because this is outside of that. So based on what we saw in the study, I think that we looked at the intersection at the YMCA. That was another one. There's another one at First Avenue. This would not have any effect on that. They're far enough apart. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that definitely answered my question. Yeah, we did actually have discussion about the width of the road a couple of years ago. There was talk of adding fog lines to kind of define where the road should be. I actually noticed today on the way here that the fog lines exist from the Rotary to the Lynn line, to the Peabody line through Lynn, but then they stop, and there's none in the Peabody side from the Peabody line all the way down to the County Street. So hopefully we could just continue those existing fog lines from Lynn through Peabody. I think that's all I have for you right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
By the way, roundabouts are different than rotaries. Just because it's interesting. Someone said, we're getting a rotary? I'll give you a little sidebar story. I was doing a project, a Mass DOT project, and there was a Rotary Club sign, and we called to remove and reset the Rotary sign, and we got a comment back that said, MassDOT does not support rotaries. So it was like they didn't realize it was a Rotary Club sign. But in any case, other questions?
Council Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Benevento. I personally have had the pleasure of knowing Mr. Benevento probably most of my life, and got reacquainted with Rich back when I first got on the council. I was able to introduce him to the mayor, and he's helped us in a number of projects, not only in the logistics of it, but to get funding. So that's my question, Mr. Benevento. What of the 1.465 or 1.3 something, is the city on the hook for all of that, or are you able to get some funding for us on that?
So this
I know that puts you on the spot, but that's the real, that's your forte.
Right, it is. So this particular project and this location is a lot different than, say, the Central Street project. The Central Street project's $15 million. It's federal and state funded. It qualified for that based on a variety of criteria. This particular intersection does not, for federal funding and state funding. So the next thing would be, okay, well, how about HSIP funding, which is Highway Safety Improvement Program funding? Well, there's a priority of projects with that as well. Generally, it's projects that are on Mass DOT's high crash list, for example, the top 200 high crash list. Well, this intersection has crashes that are about the district average and the statewide average, so it's not going to, it may get some attention, but it's not going to score well against other projects. So there are other funding programs that are out there. There's, would this qualify for a MassWorks grant? Would this qualify for Complete Streets? It may qualify for a Complete Streets application, but generally, Complete Streets is only up to $400,000. MassWorks, you generally have to show how it's going to create jobs, how it is a function of housing, and that sort of thing. I would have to look at that, probably work with Bob in Public Services and the Planning Department and talk about that. So unfortunately, this project kind of out in no man's land, if you will, in terms of funding. And as you know, Counselor, I'm probably one of the foremost experts in getting funding for cities and towns. And if there was a way to do it, we would do it. But this might be a steep hill to climb, I think, in terms of trying to find funding.
Mr. Chairman, if I could still. Rich, can you go back to the screen, the one that showed the left turns, number of turns, right turns?
Oh, this one?
There it is. So if I'm on Bartholomew Street at 7 o'clock in the morning and I want to get out and go left to the Rotary, going to work in Boston, there's 105 in the morning, 117 in the evening. Is that what that's saying?
Yep. That's during the peak hour.
Yeah. So if I were to do a roundabout, I'm going to ask you both the traffic light and the roundabout. What is a better? I'm sorry.
What would be what?
What is a better avenue to go to get traffic off of Bartholomew Street in a flowing, timely manner? How many of those? So that's 2 hours. So there's 75 cars. No, there's 52 cars that are going to go left in the morning. You said that's a 7 to 9, 52 cars an hour.
So we don't necessarily look at it in terms of how many cars are going to go out. We look at it in terms of level of service, right? So the level of service, and let's talk about the signal for a minute before the roundabout, right? So the level of service, without the left turn pocket, it ends up failing during the evening peak hour.
It is what, sorry?
The level of service during the evening peak hour fails without the left turn pocket on Linfield Street. With the left turn pocket, we go from level of service F to A, B's, and C's, right? During the evening peak, and A's and B's during the morning peak. So the level of service improves dramatically. The roundabout actually had a little bit better level of service than the traffic signal did, right? And again, why is that? Well, first of all, the roundabout's constantly moving, right? People are yielding. It's a yield condition as opposed to a stop condition, right? So they're constantly moving through the roundabout. And again, it functions well, particularly for the volume of traffic that's coming in and out of it, right? So again, it's not so much like, well, we're going to get instead of 105 left turns, we can now accommodate 120 left turns. We wouldn't look at it that way. We'd look at it in terms of level of service, and that's really the scorecard.
I'm sorry. In your professional opinion, what is better for that intersection, a roundabout or traffic lights?
Again, they both operate well, so I'm not going to answer that. Well, I suppose I could. I mean, your roundabout's a good option. The reason I like the roundabout is that there's no long-term cost. There's no power cost. There's no replacing signal equipment when it breaks. There's, none of that. So from that standpoint, and it was less, I guess overall cost was less. So it's a more efficient alternative in terms of cost, right? And, there's some added benefits. Slows traffic down. One of the other things, there's a residence right on the corner there, right? How's that resident going to feel about lights going on and off? You may be shining in the bedroom window. I don't know what the situation is, and I don't want to alarm anyone. But there's also that component of it. What do the neighbors want? So, you know, there's added benefits to these. I guess I'm sort of leaning towards, I mean, I kind of lean towards that, but
Mr. Benevento, are there ever, historically, ever any accidents in a roundabout?
sorry?
Are there ever accidents in a roundabout?
Are there ever accidents in a roundabout? Well, I'll say this sort of in a curt way. We can have the best design in the world. You can't design for a nitwit, right? Someone who's going to go blasting through the intersection. I'm sure there are accidents. I mean, I think if you Googled accidents at roundabouts, you'd probably get, yeah, there's a lot of accidents at roundabouts. You know, it's like, if there's accidents at signalized intersections. Again, I think roundabouts are, to answer your question, roundabouts are safe. Traffic is much slower. They're going through the intersection, or through the roundabout slower, 20 miles an hour. Now, one of the other questions that comes up often is, how does the fire department feel about it, right? Well, the roundabout, this would be a 60-foot roundabout. The inner circle is mountable, so when trucks go through it, the trucks can mount on it, right? But when the vehicles go through it, they stay on the asphalt, right? That's by design. They're allowed to do that. So that, you know, that makes it work as well, because we're going to slow things down. Oftentimes we'll get a comment from the fire department, well, gee, how are we going to navigate through this? Or even more so, DPS, you know, we got to plow this thing now in the wintertime. How are we going to do that? They're becoming more and more common. You're going to see them. Again, Beverly has a bunch of them. If you've been to Rossetti's, there's 2 roundabouts there at the end of Brimble Ave and Sawyer Road. If you've been to Merrimack, Massachusetts, right in town center, we did that one. That's Route 110. You know, and I'll tell you, when we were going through that design process many years ago, you know, people were coming out of the woodwork, you're going to ruin our lives. You know, once the thing was in, it's like the best thing since sliced bread now. So, and again, this is all part of the public process as well, of educating folks as to what these various traffic safety improvements are, and educating them as to the, you know, the pros and cons of each. But certainly with the volume of traffic here, these would work fine.
Thank you very much, Rich. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Council McGinn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Benevento. Did I hear correctly that the level of service on both of these would go from F in the current configuration up to, at some points in time in the day, up to an A? Did you say that, or? The level of service.
Oh.
I wasn't 100% clear, because at one point I thought you said the light was giving us a better F, but I don't, and then I think I heard you say, no, at some points in time it's an A, B, or a C. Is that, which is it?
So right now, the intersection operates free flow, right? So the level of service is failing, because what you have is you end up getting long delay and long queue. And by the way, when we look at level of service, you know, A through F, we also look at queue length, how long's the queue, and delay, how long's it taking to get through. So you might have a long queue at a particular approach, but because of the way the signals are timed, even though it's a long queue, it still gets through one cycle, one light cycle. So it's not like you just get up to the intersection, the light changes red, you got to wait, okay? Some of the approaches, and we look at all of the approaches here, so we look at the overall intersection level of service, but then we look at individual approaches and individual movements, all right? So the left turn off of Linfield Street onto Bartholomew might be a level of service E, say, right? But the rest of the intersection, other movements, like the through movement heading westbound, is a level of service B. And then once you add all that up, you look at the overall level of service for the entire intersection, right? I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but the other part of this is that once, say you went through the signal option, right? There's an adjustment period. This is all based on traffic data collected, running it through the various computer programs that we use, and coming up with what the computer says level of service. once the signal's installed, we might be out there tweaking timing, because you know what? We need to add 3 seconds to this movement, and we need to take it from this movement over here. How often do you pull up to an intersection and you're waiting and there's nobody moving? I mean, there's nobody coming, and you're sitting there waiting for the light to change. All of that stuff is part of the, advanced signal technology. We wouldn't have to deal with that. Did I answer your question?
More or less. I guess what I'm trying to simplify the question, are we looking at, with either of these alternatives, a dramatic improvement or a subtle improvement in the service level?
Oh, this would be a dramatic improvement in level of service.
That's what I'm trying to get
It was
at.
kind of a long way to get there, right? But yeah, this would be a dramatic improvement, because right now it's anarchy, and people are just, again, the barge and block person's getting out, the timid person's waiting.
Understood. Just kind of building on Councilor Rosignol's question about the short term, and anything that might be done, because, even if we were to advance one of these alternatives, we're looking at some time, and we still have a short-term issue. Is 40 miles an hour too fast there? I mean, if one of the alternatives here is, or one of the objectives, I should say, is to use these controls to calm traffic down, to slow it down. I think you said the roundabout tends to get motorists down to about 20 miles an hour. Should we be looking at something now to reduce speeds through that intersection?
Well, again, Linfield Street's an arterial roadway, so one might say, well, how about if we put speed humps in, right? Or we do bump outs or things like that. Excuse me, that you can do, we're going to put some new curbing in and that sort of thing. You could try to do that, but again, it's not going to solve the problem of all these left turns trying to get onto Bartholomew Street, or the left or the right turn coming out of Bartholomew Street to get out. Again, you're still going to have that same jockeying of who's going and who's not.
Yeah, I realize it won't solve the problem, but would it make
Sorry?
it? I realize it won't solve the problem, but would it make it safer in the short term, I guess, is the question.
I mean, again, it's hard to say if it's going to make it safer. Again, what we're trying to do here is we need to organize the traffic. And by maybe restricting things, you might slow it down a little bit, all right? But, now you might have traffic queued all the way up to First Ave or back to Casco Road, because now everybody's kind of going through, and it's still not organized, right? We're trying to simplify the driving function. We're trying to, it's Councilor Gould's turn to go, and Councilor Turco has to wait, right? It's as simple as that, right? Because right now it's just whoever can get out, they get out. And the other thing too to consider is, even during the non-peak traffic times, that's when the cars are blasting down Linfield Street. So you get someone coming down Linfield Street westbound, someone's pulling out to make a left turn out of Bartholomew to go towards Boston. There's a potential impact, right? So it's things like that. I feel like I'm the doom and gloom guy tonight. It's like
No, you're just answering the questions honestly. So these roundabouts that you made reference to in Beverly, there's also some relatively newer ones in Salem. You probably have seen those as well. Is there data on these that would suggest they're functioning as well as they were designed to function? I mean, I've seen these in a bunch of municipalities now, but it's within the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years, they've started popping up. So that's not a lot of time in terms of is there now a pool of data that suggests they're actually working the way they're supposed to work?
So the Institute of Traffic Engineers, you heard of ITE? ITE, that's sort of they're the gods of traffic. They've done analysis on roundabouts all over the country, and roundabouts have been quite popular in Europe, well before we even thought about it, right? So ITE has data on the effectiveness and the safety and function of roundabouts. From just a general how are they doing, I'm sure if you called Mayor Cahill, he would be telling you how wonderful they're working, and they are. They've been working great. The one on Essex Street near Harry Ball Field, from a function standpoint and a traffic accident standpoint, they've been working great. I don't know if there's been any, we haven't done any post-analysis, say on the few in Beverly and the one in Merrimack, but I can tell you just from feedback, gee, these things are working great, wish we had done it a long time ago. So, but if you're really interested in the data, I would just, Google ITE, roundabout effectiveness and things like that. You'll probably get some good information.
Thank you. As far as the funding goes, I would agree with Councilor Gould's comments about your expertise in helping us track down funding. That's certainly been my experience with you personally, as well as with with World Tech overall. And that 400 grand for complete streets sounds like it might be something worth pursuing. Does that have potential? That would obviously not cover the entire cost, but it would be a big chunk. Does that have reasonable potential for this project?
Complete streets?
Complete streets.
The thing with complete streets, it would have potential relative to traffic safety and things like that, but there's certain things complete streets won't pay for. So let's say we do the intersection and want to pave the road, they won't allow you to pave the road, or the money's not allowable for roadway paving. The only way they'll do that is if you're changing the roadway cross sections and putting in bike lanes, then they allow you to pave the road. The maximum amount on complete streets is $400,000. We did have one on Perkins that was a complete streets project. But again, with the cost of this, it might help defray some of that cost. You can't use complete streets money for design. You can use complete streets money for construction administration. So there's a lot of restrictions with complete streets. Again, it could be part of the project. Again, it's become very competitive. When Complete Streets first came out, they were trying to get cities and towns to sign up. A lot of people adopted policies because it was, hey, there was some money out there. And now I think they're like 70–80% of all 351 cities and towns have Complete Streets policies. So you know what happens every time a new round comes out, everybody's, running to the trough. So it's more competitive, I guess is what I'm saying. But nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? So.
Thank you, Mr. Benedetto. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Council Charis, Turco, and Rosano in that order. Council Charis?
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to be clear. Rotaries, roundabouts, are they the same? I grew up calling them rotaries. I'm sorry. I grew up calling them rotaries. Are they physically the same, or is there a difference between a rotary and a roundabout?
So you mean between the signal and the roundabout?
No.
Oh yeah, rotaries are
wider.
Yeah, they're wider on different roadways. Yeah, this is not a rotary. So a rotary, where there's a rotary at the end of the Lynn Marsh Road in Revere? That's a rotary, right? It's a lot different, higher speeds, multiple lanes, that kind of a thing.
And that was my point. I grew up on the Cape, and we had rotaries throughout the Cape. So when I came off, can you not hear me? There you go. You can probably hear me now. I grew up on the Cape, so we had rotaries all over the place. So when I came up north, I was used to it. So the rotaries are wider, multiple lanes, my understanding. This is only a single lane, so if you're coming off Bartholomew, is there only width for one vehicle if they're going to take a right on Linfield to a car that's going to take a left on Linfield?
Right. So what you end up having is so Bartholomew is two lanes, one in each direction, right? As you approach Linfield Street, there's a splitter island. So the roadway splits. There's islands that split, and what that does is it directs the vehicles heading from Bartholomew Street into Linfield Street. It directs them to the center of the rotary, because now you got me saying it, roundabout. The other key point is when we design the roundabout, we purposely are deflecting traffic into the circle. We don't want it to be a straight shot so they can skirt around it. The deflection angles have to go so that we're deflecting the traffic in the roundabout. Why are we doing that? We want them to slow down. And just like any other thing, if there are vehicles already in the roundabout, it's a yield condition to those vehicles that are entering, right? So so the traffic in the roundabout has the right of way. The vehicles entering have to yield. But everybody's moving, right?
One of the other questions that was kind of similar to mine is the difference between the amount of accidents in a roundabout and a lighted intersection. Is there any significant data on that there is 5% more accidents in a roundabout compared to a signal light?
I don't have that information. Again, that would be that might be something if you wanted to Google ITE, you could find that out. Again, I think there's a lot of latent conditions that you have to consider, right? The functional classification of the roadway, the volume of traffic, the prevailing speed, the posted speed, the pedestrians present. There's a whole pile of things that you could look at. Is there a pedestrian phase to the traffic signals? There's all sorts of things that you could look at that would have an effect on that. So even if you did look it up and they said, well, you know, a traffic signal has 5% more accidents than a roundabout, I would take a look at that and say, okay, I need to know more. Why? Why is that?
One other thing is when you talk about the speed, 20 miles an hour through the roundabout, the roadway is 40 miles an hour. Where would you recommend that you're not going to go from 40 to 20 right at the roundabout. How far down each way on Linfield would you expect to change that speed from 40 to 30 or whatever?
So the engineers in the office, obviously, again, based on the width of the roadway, based on the functional classification, based on the 85th percentile speed, those, there'd be advanced signing. So there'd be advanced signing saying that there's a roundabout ahead, there's a warning sign that has chasing arrows. I don't know if you've seen that before. All of that is, there are standards for that. So those signs are placed based on those standards. So to say, you know, is it 200 feet down the road? And then another sign 150 feet, and another sign. So there's adequate advanced signage to warn folks that they're coming into a roundabout. You can't just have the roundabout because, you know, someone's zipping down Linfield Street. Next thing you know, they're in the planter in the middle that has all the nice seasonal flowers in it, right?
And I believe my last question, you hinted on shifting the roundabout to the left towards the city-owned land than what it shows here on the map. That's obviously, so we're not looking at taking any, looking to need to take anybody's land. Am I correct?
That's right. And so actually the day we went out to look at this was last fall, I think, with Bob and Will Politz and another engineer from my office. We looked at, you know, gee, if we wanted to put a roundabout in, you know, how would this fit? And we were advised that the city owns some land. So the idea here always with every project is to minimize land takings and right-of-way impacts, and also utility relocations, right? We don't want to be moving poles and all that stuff if we don't have to. So by shifting this thing over, and again, we don't have survey yet, so, you know, we could say, hey, great, we're going to move this to the southwest corner of the intersection, only to find out that, you know, the survey tells us something else, and now we're, you know, back to the drawing board figuring out what we're going to do. Right now, based on what we know, yes, we would move that to minimize land takings and utility relocations.
And I'm sorry, I lied. I had one more question. And you hinted on with the fire engines. So when a engine is going through the intersection, they have the ability to red light all corners of the intersection, so they have free passing going through. Is there anything like that available for that? So if an engine is going down Linfield Street or take a left on Bartholomew, is there an ability to have any lights stopping the traffic on the other directions?
So with a signalized intersection, emergency preemption, the city has Opticom. That'll be on the Central Street project as well. What that does, obviously, as you just mentioned, so if the fire truck or the emergency vehicle is heading eastbound, the lights heading eastbound turn green to get everybody out of the way, allow traffic to continue to move. With the roundabout, no, there are no signals. But remember, nobody stopped. Everybody's moving anyway. So if the emergency vehicle's coming down the street and there are people in the roundabout, they're already moving through the roundabout. The approaching traffic's going to yield to the fire truck anyhow, right? So there's, well, we hope, right? Yeah. Again, we can't design for the, the person that doesn't obey the rules. But the roundabout does not have emergency preemption signals.
Councilor Turco.
Thank you. I know you've already been asked this question twice, but you kind of took a long road, so I lost you a little bit. Council McGinn and Council Rossignol had asked you about some temporary solutions. And just so I could be a little bit more concise, I think what they were trying to say is, can we just put the left turn lane in temporarily? If this project is an 18-month project, for the 18 months, could we have DPS install a left turn separate lane to try to alleviate some of the issue right now? Is that a possibility?
I would not recommend that, and this is the reason why. So now you have a left turn pocket, you have someone waiting to make a left onto Bartholomew, and you have someone going through on Linfield Street while someone's trying to make a left turn out of Bartholomew to go westbound on Linfield Street. They're not going to see the car going around, and you're going to cause a conflict point. So I would not recommend that.
Thank you.
Councilor Rossignol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. This has really been informative. I know that your traffic study did not just include this area of Linfield Street, it included the entire length of Linfield Street. In your opinion, and I know we're only talking about one intersection regarding the whole street, and I know that there's choke points at County, there's choke points at the end at where it meets Washington, and you had already mentioned other issues with this intersection in particular. In your opinion, is this where you would start?
If you were starting someplace, this intersection, again, just based on the Warren analysis, is the place you would start. Obviously, there are improvements moving forward at County, Linfield, and Summit, and that's part of the water main project, and Bob's done a great job in coordinating, getting improvements there with the signals and so forth. But if you're looking at the rest of the corridor, this is pretty much it. I mean, I guess the only other one would be, and I don't think we studied this one, I can't quite remember, but, Linfield at Washington, right at the gas station. But see, now that might be a TIP project or some other funding mechanism. But just based on your question, yeah, this would be where you'd start.
Thank you.
So I thought, thank you, Mr. Benevento. I think this was a great discussion. I had a couple questions written down, but quite frankly, the other councils asked them. The only thing I did want to bring up is we did ask Captain Richards to be here. He was unable to make it. He did attend the fallen police officer's funeral in the western part of the state, so he was not able to be here. I think it is important that we do hear from the police department, that we do have them weigh in. The only thing that had crossed my mind possibly with the 12 to 18-month lead time, no matter which direction we head in, is I will ask him when he comes here, the possibility of maybe putting a police officer out there during the very, very high peak times, whether it be 7 to 9 a.m. or 4 to 6 p.m. And obviously, I don't know if that's just taking a police officer out of the car and putting them, or if it's an overtime. That's something that I'm sure they can address. But that's what crossed my mind initially, to try and do something to add a little bit of safety while we, because I think we're all looking for that. I heard that many times by many different councils. We're looking for something safety immediately, and I actually had the same suggestion that Councilor Turco had, and I thought that might be an issue, and you addressed that, so I understand that. But as I said, if we can just do anything in the immediate future, I think we all want to try and add some safety. So we are going to keep this in committee, and myself or Councilor Welton, we will reach out to Captain Richards, ask him to come back and weigh in from the police standpoint of view, and then any other questions that lingered or that might arise. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So
To adjourn by Councilor Welton. Thank you. Need a roll call vote.
Councilors Manning Martin,
Yes.
Welton,
Yes.
Charis.
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes, motion,
Motion carries 5-0.
meeting adjourned.